Today we come to the last video on Exodus chapter 14, and that is verses 30 and 31. But let's read from verse 29. You see at the bottom of the screen here. Exodus 14 verse 29. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on the right and on the left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. Here we see the final aspects of God's deliverance and the birth of faith. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Here we see this moment mattered deeply. Israel had not only crossed the sea, they saw their enemies defeated with their own eyes. Remember that they had been enslaved to the Egyptians for some time. God wanted to know their deliverance was complete. The drowned Egyptian shoulders stand for an old way of life in slavery, now gone forever. Sometimes the greatest mercy God gives us is a visible reminder that our past no longer owns us. F.P. Mayer says, though the pressure of your trial is almost unbearable, you will one day see your Egyptian dead. In other words, today's struggle will one day be a testimony. Of course, this also points on to an eternal victory in Revelation chapter 15. As the morning of eternity breaks, they will see death and the grave like Egyptians strewn on the shores of the sea of glass. There's an echo of Revelation 15 verse 2, where the redeemed stand by a sea of glass in victory over the enemy. And so on reflection, what Egyptians, old fears, sins or wounds has God already laid dead on the shore of your life? Can you recognize that that bondage is truly over? Second thing we see, and we see this, that the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians in verse 30. Israel could not save themselves. This was the Lord's doing. Spurgeon said, if God brought us out of Egypt and then abandoned us, the Father will lose his faithfulness, the Son his glory as the Saviour, and the Spirit his honour as the one who finishes every work he begins. This echoes Philippians 1 verse 6, he who began a good work in you will complete it. God saves us because he loves us, and he also saves to guard his glory, uphold his promises, and display his power. God doesn't save halfway. And so where do we need to trust that his work in you will be finished in our lives? The third thing we see is that the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Israel responded exactly as God intended, with reverence and faith. Unfortunately, we know at the end of the next chapter didn't last long, but doesn't remind us that faith based on emotion fades, but faith built on the truth endures. The Passover and the Red Sea are linked. We know Exodus 12 is the Passover, and this chapter and chapter 15 is a celebration of coming through the Red Sea. One without the other is incomplete. Passover redeemed them, and the Red Sea gave them their final freedom. Likewise, the cross and the resurrection must go together. The cross pays for our sin, and the resurrection proves the victory. This reminds us also of 1 Corinthians 10 verses 1 to 2, which calls the Red Sea crossing a baptism. It was their passage from slavery into the identity, from fear into formation. And so on reflection in our own lives, has God's deliverance in your life drawn you into deeper worship, trust, and dependence upon him? This is what we see in this last few phrases at the end of verse 31. And so as we close, Exodus 14 ends with a defining truth. God saves fully, visibly, and purposefully. He doesn't leave loose ends. He doesn't rescue halfway. He doesn't abandon his people in the wilderness. He delivers you so clear that one day you'll stand on the shore and say, these old enemies, I see them no more. And as God's salvation becomes clearer, faith grows deeper, worship becomes richer, and trust becomes stronger. Take courage. The God who drowned the Egyptians will also guide you into the promise that he has prepared. Thank you for listening.